Good evening and welcome to Slam the Gavel, the show that tells it all regarding family court, other court issues, as well as CPS. I am your host, Marianne Petrie. Bradley's mother, Narkis Golan, passed away 3 months ago. He is autistic and needs structured routine and therapies he receives for his autism 6 days a week. However, Italy just entrusted Bradley to Italian Social Services. If he is ruled to go back, he will face the next 3 to 4 years in the Italian foster care system, where he can't speak or understand the language. He will be taken away from the only family he has ever known. Please call Governor Hochul at 518-474-8390. That's 518-474-8390 to keep Bradley here in these United States. Hashtag keep Bradley safe. I've got a brand new guest on. I am happy to have Ken Vignali on. He has spent 8 years in the Army serving in intelligence-related and combat arms-related roles and led a personal security detail while deployed to Iraq in 2009 to 2010. While on active duty, he experienced issues with the family law system himself, which including getting ostracized by his own unit and being let down by attorneys and abuses by law enforcement. After he left active duty, he worked for several large cybersecurity consulting firms supporting large companies. During that time, he also got into private investigative services on the side and began helping regular people with their own domestic and civil cases, ranging from domestic abuse situations to divorce, missing persons, and a host of other situations. During this period of time before, he launched his own company and got involved with nonprofits in the space, and he saw that women and children especially were not getting the full support they needed from the taking back control of the online lives and device security to support with physical security and interfacing with law enforcement, judges, and CPS agencies. He created his consumer-focused company, one of the few out there that provide the level of services he does, called Signature Peace of Mind Advisors. He is also chair of the board of a nonprofit that was launched last year that's called We Create Warriors, which is currently based out of Texas, that was founded to help survivors of domestic violence and sexual assault get on their feet and connected with job opportunities, educational opportunities, and resources for launching their own businesses. And they're also working on offering self-defense training as well through partners. And I welcome you, Ken Vignali, to my podcast. I'm so glad to have you on. And you really got into this really deep. How did that lead you into this?
Um, Number one, thank you for the opportunity to speak with you and get in front of your audience. It's been a goal to try to, like you're doing with your podcast, raise awareness and highlight different perspectives of these cases that individuals, families, mothers are going through. They're definitely very nuanced, and everybody has uh, a lot of their own experiences and things they may not have considered until listening to your show. So number one, thank you so much for hosting me today. The way I got into it, I alluded to some personal experiences while I was on active duty. I don't want to bore the audience with the details, but there is a lot of domestic abuse in the military community. So I observed that. And then when I got out, I came across a lot of friends and family and colleagues that were going through their own situations. And it seems like, the number one thing is, well, contact your local shelter, contact the National Domestic Violence Hotline. And they can connect you with resources. The challenge is, it's such a prolific problem, number one. And not that the resources just can't scale. And there are a lot of components to these cases where cell phones are involved, computers, smart vehicles. There's a whole technology component to it. that further complicates the person's situation. And, unless you're trained or have some education or exposure, it's really hard to articulate that, law enforcement and other service providers in the family court system. Because typically, if somebody says, I'm being stalked, my phones seem to be compromised over and over again.
Mhm.
Typically the knee-jerk response from the legal system is they, the person making these accusations or complaints, they're crazy. So there's a lack of awareness as well in the law enforcement and judicial system in this space. And I know other colleagues of mine and other organizations are trying to help in that capacity, raise awareness, educate law enforcement, nationwide, and about all of these facets. With stalkerware on phones and other software that abusers end up putting on their their targets devices, basically. So I wanted to, I work with organizations like Operation Safe Escape. They are the primary organization in the U.S. presently that offers technical support for shelters and victims. That includes open source intelligence, that includes, digital forensics for their devices, in helping, victims and survivors regain control of
Mhm.
their, online and digital lives, and, take that control away, that technical control away from their abusers. That's the long-term goal. So I had already, been working on, building out my own consumer-focused firm,
Mhm.
not to take advantage, but um, a lot of the clients that ended up coming to me anyway happen to be coincidentally, survivors of abuse, um, and sexual assault victims, victims of, violent crime, and they just, there are a lot of large firms that offer forensics and some of the technical capabilities, but usually my observations as I was building out my offerings were they'll take the data and then they'll just give a large, like, 100-page report, to the victims, and they have to figure out what it means.
Mhm.
Um, so I saw a need, where, these individuals needed, help removing the jargon, right?
Mhm.
Every industry has their words, their acronyms, their lingo that they use, and it really doesn't provide value. They spend all this money
Mhm.
and they have no idea what it means. So, um, I wanted to try to bring that personal touch, that personal focus on, I'm not just taking your money and giving you a dump of all your data. Let me take a look. I provide second looks for clients, so that way they're not out additional money. To see, okay, yeah, this firm, found the stalkerware, they found, this remote access, and this is what it means. Um, so in my journey with my offerings, my business, and my, the survivors I've been working with, the consistent thing is, we just nobody has been able to provide the clarity, the clarification, the education, that myself and others have been able to do. So, um, it's really been motivational, and it's, more driven. I know companies are focused on profit, right?
Mhm.
Uh, so I do have a primary job where I work for a consulting company, supporting corporate clients, but my focus, otherwise is for the, single moms,
Mhm.
the families that are going through this, and advocating for them, with law enforcement, with their attorneys, with, working with prosecutors and such, to help them through, the entire life cycle of their circumstances. So, and there are many times where I do interact with Child Protective Services on behalf of, my clients. So,
Mhm.
and speaking with their investigators and speaking with their, like in Texas, for example, they have master investigators, in cases are stagnant for too long, or they're stuck and they need a quick resolution. So I have a client that I've been close with this past year and a half because of her extreme situations, where CPS has been weaponized against her and her children, by an adult son and a malicious ex-husband. So I've been consistently helping her with documentation and evidence, and kind of repeating the whole cycle, because I'm sure you and your listeners are well aware CPS is one of those agencies where they could have all of these open case files on somebody, but they don't sync, right? So that's been a big challenge, especially in her case, where all of these end up getting resolved. After the investigators are met with, they meet with the kids. But the problem is, these people, we know who's calling in these false accusations. CPS still comes out and show a new caseworker comes out that has they don't take the time to look at historical information, and realize that these were all closed previously as unfounded. And in this particular lady's circumstances, I have asked them about this, and I do have I have recorded conversations with the CPS agents in Texas, and they've admitted to on tape to wrongdoing in some of these situations where they illegally took her children, working with the local school districts, and putting them in situations that really further endangered their lives, despite evidence that was provided to them about the individuals they put them with. So I mean, so much to the fact where they've told this ex-husband that has no legal rights to these children. There was one caseworker that actually told him to hide the girls from the mother, like bring them somewhere where they cannot be found, which is completely illegal. That's kidnapping, right? A non-custodial parent. You have yet another malicious caseworker that doesn't really understand the law and scope of her position, advocating and pushing for these children to disappear from the mother, despite her record being she doesn't have a criminal record. She's unfortunately been another individual that's done everything she's can for her children first, even through her like darkest moments with her abusive partners. And that's been my experience with her, and why I stick close to her case, because in all of my interactions with her, I want to make sure my kids are safe. I don't care about me. I want to make sure that they can go to school without fear of CPS taking them, without my ex-husband disappearing with them for days on end. And unfortunately, her nuclear family, her family doesn't fully understand the severity of this, and they've been roped in by CPS, and it's just a really heartbreaking ongoing situation for her.
That is quite a mess when they enter your lives through a false accusation, which can happen to anybody.
Right. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, that's I mean, I know in many states it's it's a criminal offense, right? If you call 911, with the swatting situations, for example. I work with clients that are they get swatted where somebody argues with them online or whatever. This is not related to domestic abuse per se, but it's an example of, okay, well, somebody makes a false accusation with 911. Somebody is being held hostage, there's a gun involved, or whatever the call into 911 seems to be. So when those cases are investigated by law enforcement, they usually do, people end up getting charged when they're found. And so what I'd love to see as a change, and there's a lot of things that need to be resolved in,
Yes.
in the family court system, family law system, from CPS to prosecutors to judges and lawyers to all of the professionals involved. But, I would love to see, some more conversations about, we need to have the same kind of repercussions and accountability for those that call in for, numerous times, false accusations to, weaponize CPS against, these families, which just cause, compounded fear with the children that are involved. Um, they grow up to not trust law enforcement. They grow up, learning to be afraid because, they never know what's going to happen because, CPS keeps taking them, from their mother, or I know this happens in, single father households too. So, I
Mhm,
guess to be a little fair, but, most of my experience are with the single mothers going
mhm,
through these situations. So I would love to see accountability and legislation where, all right, let's, when cases are deemed to be unfounded and they keep getting calls for the same accusations, where CPS would go back, law enforcement would go back, look at the people. I know calls are supposed to be anonymous. They're not, because, in Texas, I spoke to one of the lead investigators, and, they can trace back the calls. So the technical capability is there. I would love to see change where accountability happens,
mhm.
um, in that respect as well. Not just, obviously family reunification, but also long-term accountability for those making the false accusations, as part of this. So that would definitely go a long way. So,
How many cases have you seen where someone has called in 30 false accusations or 60? Because you've got some screwballs out there that are so vindictive, they'll do this to a person.
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, it's a psychological game that they're playing with their, with the person they're abusing, right?
Yeah.
So in many cases, I mean, I know single fathers go through this. I know I have personal friends, but to answer your question, I mean, I know this happens at scale nationwide. And speaking to other professionals and colleagues, I know it happens at scale. Personally, cases I've worked, um, you know, over a dozen, I guess at this point, where there is that volume of activity, and it just compounds the issue if they're going through divorce, if they're going through other, civil matters with their other partner. It just ties up resources and serves to, break somebody down psychologically, because they never know what's going to happen day to day, moment to moment, just because of how often this happens. And, in many cases, the people I've worked with, the victims, they're not combative. They're, in my personal experience, I can't speak as a whole, but in my personal experience with the individuals I've served, they've seemed very compliant
Mhm,
despite the abuse. They want to appear to be, the bigger person, and, prove that, they're not the one causing harm, or, their children are being sufficiently taken care of, through with food and education and, a safe place to sleep. And they're not bruised, they're not, physically or emotionally abused, by the single mother in a lot of cases. So,
mhm.
that I've dealt with. So, I have seen it more often than it should be happening.
Have you had to put a CPS caseworker in their place at all?
Um, yeah, I mean, there have been a few situations with this most recent case that I've been involved with for the last year and a half. Um, so I try to, I do my best to keep emotion out of it, especially when I'm, trying to be that, service provider, that
Mhm,
advocate, for my client. But, it has gotten heated. And in the case where, this particular CPS caseworker, this lady, advocated and told, not only the lady's parents, but also the ex-husband, um, uh, um, to hide the children, right? and keep them hidden. Don't let anybody know where they're at. They actually, and to answer your question, yes, I did. There was um, when we had a couple of phone calls, I did record them. Um, but I did call her out and mentioned laws on the books that make it a felony to kidnap children.
Mhm.
If you don't have legal authority, if they're not a ward of the court, if they're not a custodial parent or grandparents or whatever. So I have in a heated, raised voice manner in an exchange, called her out for that, saying, if you're held accountable for your actions, you could be charged with a felony,
Mhm.
multiple felonies, because there were three girls involved,
Yeah.
with this particular case, and they actually were abused in the care of, this non-custodial figure.
Mhm.
So they were psychologically abused, called fat.
Yeah.
They weren't fed. They were denied food. They were denied their phones and communication. While they were being hidden. Um, so and this particular caseworker even you know called this lady's attorney a liar, that he wasn't really a lawyer. So there's a lot of misplaced, I guess, egos. You really need to keep your egos out of this, I guess, no matter what part of the process you're involved in, whether you're an
Mhm.
advocate, whether you're supposed to be a professional, right? So CPS has their documented mission statement, but we all are acutely aware of what really happens at scale. So I know it's a prolific issue.
And it just doesn't stop. What do you do, I'm sure with people that have issues with their cell phones? I don't know how these people get into hacking a cell phone, you know?
Right. Um, so I mean, these, in the society, day and age we live in, unfortunately, it's super easy for an abuser, a stalker, uh, to maintain access to their victim. A lot of times I see things known as stalkerware, software that can be installed on a person's cell phone. You can put it on a computer, and that it's not visible to the person being abused. It runs in the background, but it captures all of their text messages, their emails, their phone calls. So anything that's done on the phone is sent to the stalker, the abuser. So that is a very common technique I see.
Mhm.
Um, and then another common uh, challenge I see is a lot of partners, whether they've dated for a long time and then the partner became abusive, just by nature of our society, I see a lot of people have joint bank accounts, joint emails, joint iCloud accounts.
Mhm.
Um, and when children are involved, they have joint accounts or sole accounts for, I know a lot of schools use, mobile applications these days to, for teachers to communicate with parents and send photos and all of that. So I see a lot of these cases, victims don't, the average person doesn't think, oh, I need to cut off access to them. I need to create my own account, or I need to make sure, their devices aren't linked with my iCloud or my email or whatever or the bank or whatever it may be, right? So there's a lot of education that I try to, there's a lot of awareness I try to provide as well,
Mhm.
and help the victims and survivors I work with go through this. And it's tedious.
Mhm.
It's stressful to think about. So I try to take it slow
Yeah.
and be empathetic, and just go through a checklist of things with them, of things that they may have not considered. And then once these key things are addressed, it does go a long way, in reducing the ongoing victimization.
Mhm.
So removing the digital access, and putting in the additional controls such as multi-factor authentication. So there are multiple steps from a technical standpoint that I help victims go through to make sure the access is cut off, make sure um, they have better controls in place moving forward. And then there is a digital forensic component to it where we take their phone and run it through digital forensic software such as Magnet Axiom or Belkasoft. There's a lot of court approved software that we use and available. Where we do provide these services, we'll take the forensic images off the devices, whether it's computer or phone, and provide clear evidence and um, sworn statement saying we found MSpy. MSpy is a popular. There are lots of them, but MSpy comes up a lot as one particular software that's easy to get and install on iPhones and things like that. So we're able to show evidence of this software being installed and what it's been doing. So there's a lot of facets to this
Mhm.
that help a lot of cases. So and my long-term client in Texas, that was found on her devices and her kids' devices as well. That's another aspect. A lot of individuals, overlook kids' phones. A lot of kids
Mhm.
have mobile devices, and I've seen non-custodial parents using those phones to track the mother in a lot of cases. So
Mhm.
it's not a mechanism to try to maintain a relationship with the child. It's just another uh, hook, if you will,
Mhm.
into keeping tabs on their targets. The person being abused life. So they're coming and going. Their habits. Are they seeing anybody? Are they dating anybody else? Where are they going? And kids are not. That a lot of times they're truthful, especially younger ones, 6, 7 years old, and they don't typically want to lie to a parent regardless of the situation.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of those are some challenging aspects where people are consistently found again as well after we do everything else. Usually that's a loophole or a gap that had been overlooked. Was they're posting on social media, um, they're communicating with the other parent or the ex-partner. And in one particular, this case, there's an adult son that's been a major part of the problem,
Mhm.
feeding information to some malicious third parties
Mhm.
that have used that to, further stalk and cause harm and commit fraud. So it's the technical aspect is a big one.
You know, also with SIM cards, I'm sure you have people saying, "I've got to change my SIM card because they're back again," you know?
Right. So, with SIM cards, some like companies like Verizon and I think AT&T and the big players for that, it's not nothing is 100% guaranteed.
Mhm.
There are mitigation steps. So for the SIM card specifically, um, all of these companies offer the ability to go into your account and lock it down so that it can't be swapped. So the person, your abuser can't call in and say, I want to change this number to this carrier or to this device. Because if they try, and when I've seen this work as designed, the owner will get a notification on their phone. They'll get a phone call from the phone carrier alerting them to this, and making sure that this is authorized activity. And so this happens a lot. But Yeah, that's a good point. So there are phone services that offer more privacy and security. And we not I'm not here to pitch my services and my business. That's great to get the airtime, but at the end of the day, whether you come through Operation Safe Escape or We Create Warriors, the nonprofit that I am a chairman on, with other individuals, uh, there's a lot of things that can be done, affordable devices that can be used
Mhm.
and set up securely that, for a couple $100, I set them up, with a secure operating system, and it's not an iPhone, it's not an Android, but there are ways to affordably set people up with secure devices
Mhm,
uh, that are hardened against a lot of these common attacks and attempts to hijack the phone calls and things like that.
mhm. Now, have you had to go to court and testify with some of the, domestic violence, stalking issues?
So I have not been asked to testify. However, um, I have provided, forensic evidence. I've provided written testimony, sworn affidavits uh, to attorneys
Mhm,
and both prosecutors and the defense counsel. And I have had really good success in um, in helping people either get charges dropped,
mhm,
or some of the same evidence can be used for a lot of people face evictions, people lose their jobs. So there's a lot of areas where this type of support can come into play. This lady was facing an eviction
mhm,
because she was not getting her notices in the mail and things like that, and emails and calls. These organizations were unable to contact her. So uh, I used the same evidence, the forensic evidence, and provided written documentation to these parties saying, based on our investigation and what we found, this contributed to her inability to communicate with the legal system, to communicate with, her legal team, and
mhm,
just basically anybody else she needed to, because these abusers were able to constantly get these applications on her phones and take over her internet services and things like that. So um, I've had good success in being able to educate and provide you know evidence and testimony in that regard. But no, I have not to date actually testified in a court of law for these individuals. Usually those affidavits and other documentation uh, have been sufficient to satisfy the situation to
mhm,
date. So I'm hoping I'm hoping through education, I'm hoping this trend continues, as we
mhm,
raise awareness in education, that there are a lot of things that are out of the victim's control, and they just need the right people to highlight these facts.
mhm. Do you have attorneys contacting you, trying to, help their client get into a phone or their computer system?
I have had a couple in Texas. I've had a one in Colorado, but I have looked into, so I have had them reach out to me
Mhm,
because of referrals from individuals I've supported, um, and that's another aspect that I'd love to continue to grow with the awareness piece, is educating attorneys, because with all the forums and the boards and the podcasts and things I've listened to, I think a lot of attorneys and judges are not trained on the cyber stalking and the things we're discussing today. These are really, while it's been going on for many years, a lot of these professionals are not formally educated or trained, in this arena. So that's another item on my goal list, is to continue reaching out to attorney networks and law firms, and trying to educate them on these things. And I know there are service providers, like Magnet Forensics and other vendors, that are trying to do that as well with conferences they host as part of their normal operating business. So that's I think something that would go a long way, is uh, getting those conversations and dialogues happening at a more frequent and higher level.
mhm. Well, I notice, like with some of these bar associations these attorneys belong to, they'll offer CEU classes,
Right.
and you ought to get in there. That would be really good.
No, that's a fantastic point, and I do have a colleague that she has a similar technical background that I do as well. but she also has a very, um, I think, beneficial skill set and background working with law firms directly. So I've been having, these conversations with her and, using her as a soundboard. And, I definitely want to, that's going to be elevated on my strategy, my strategy board, to try to get involved with those bar associations and offer these, maybe 1 hour sessions or whatever it works out to be.
Mhm. It's just such a mammoth task
It is.
to get the point across, especially to attorneys and judges with this cyber stalking and cyberbullying, you know?
Yes. Yes.
You know,
Um,
what do you think of the cyberbullying? Is it I'm sure it's happening to single mothers or single dads or whatever, but also kids in high school?
oh yeah, there was the that news article of I believe a 14-year-old girl that committed suicide in New Jersey about I think about a week or two ago after enduring a lot of bullying in person and the cyber. So I've seen it firsthand. My daughter has gone through it, and there's a situation at her middle school that I'm trying to help her through, involving another female friend of hers. Um,
Mm.
it's another one of those things where a lot of schools are adopting software, right? As I'm seeing more schools giving laptops out instead of textbooks, and
Mhm.
with that, a lot of them have monitoring software. That's another discussion. But this monitoring software is set up to look for key things like kids talking about planning a school shooting or harming themselves, harming others, um, cheating and whatever else. They've got a keyword list set up for their schools. And yeah, this is another, this isn't a gun debate. This is more uh, education.
Mhm.
And, I'm a major, as I've grown older and encountered more scenarios with my own kid and people. In many cases, I see, at least in these situations I've been involved in, I think if the school systems can not only use that software to penalize kids, but maybe listen to their friends and try to understand what's going on. Like, and there's this particular case that's ongoing locally with my daughter. She has a friend that is hard of hearing. She has a
Mhm.
hearing aid or a cochlear, and she had been relentlessly bullied for most of the school year. So she had sent my daughter a list of people that have been harassing her, and I think she said she wanted to punch them. I don't remember if she said she wanted to kill them, but the school flagged on that email and brought my daughter in and spoke to her, and they said they were gonna, my daughter explained name by name like what she had observed, with the bullying.
Mhm.
And the school said they were gonna address the bullies, but they ended up, suspending the abused girl instead. So she's going through, a period of suspension, and um, it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking. I'm not saying every case is like this. I mean, in her case, she has a lot of abuse going on at home with the stepfather, not very helpful, supposedly. I've wanted to meet these parents and try to get to know them and see if there's a way to help. I mean, I
Mhm.
am not a trained child psychologist to put that out there, but having
Mhm.
children of my own and, seeing the situations I have, I really, with kids, especially if you can, provide early intervention, whether you're trained or not, just as a concerned parent or person, I think that would go a long way. So, um, to hopefully, I mean, ideally, I'm not saying this is going to resolve all potential school shooting scenarios or, violence that we see in the news, but I think, it could go a long way in saving a couple of lives, like the girl in New Jersey that committed suicide a few
Mhm.
weeks ago, and others just trying to take the time to understand, what they're going through. Because I understand when you're a principal, administrator of a school, you can't possibly know everybody and everything going on, but um, you know, equipping teachers, maybe, ideally, and even the kids. I know some schools do anti-bullying assemblies,
Mhm.
but finding a way to really make that stick long term and action that. So instead of, when these situations come up, I would love to see uh, intervention instead of punitive judgment right away.
Mhm.
I understand schools have to do their own threat assessment. Is this person capable of, and or do they have access to whatever? So I know they go through their own risk assessment. Some just have a zero tolerance policy,
Mhm.
just in general. So, but yeah, to answer your question, I know I was rambling. Apologies. At the end of the
Oh,
day, I
no.
would love to see uh, advocacy, for the students, especially when they've already had been expressing to friends and peers that they've been having a rough time at school. There was a teacher that was mocking her for claiming she wasn't deaf, and so it's just looking at things holistically. I like looking at situations holistically, and with my even beyond my cyber and digital security background, my physical security background, you have to try to look at the totality of a situation when you're, either arriving on scene or trying to, prevent a shooting at a church or
Mhm.
public facility. You've got to look at the totality of a situation and how you handle it and address it. So that's what I am largely on the bandwagon these days of, mental health and, trying
Mhm.
to address the root cause and provide hope for these kids going through the cyberbullying. I mean, I've lost kids before the computer stuff was big. I mean, I've lost friends to bullying, and when I was in middle school years ago. So I totally get it, and I'd love to see a change in our society with that, which is hard, with how prolific um, TikTok is, Snapchat, and whatever the flavor of the app, the flavor of the day is app wise. It's
Yeah.
it's hard to police all of that, but um, I'm trying to get more involved on a personal level with my child, and trying to practice what I preach.
Mhm. Well, yeah, shame on that school for not going after the bullies, and they penalize the victim. And it seems like even in the court system, they're doing that.
Yeah, um, it is heartbreaking because I know these bullies are continuing their abuse because they're going after my daughter now for being friends with this other female student, um, and so it causes a lot of unnecessary mental distress. And my daughter is not on social media. She doesn't have a phone, thankfully. And when I have these conversations with her, when she sees friends going through these different situations and boys wanting her Snapchat or TikTok or whatever username handle, I said, I may be a crazy parent for not allowing you to have a device and
Mhm.
access to these apps and things, but being able to see it from your friend's perspective and what they're going through, and the level of psychological and mental abuse. And school is hard enough, right? I
Mhm.
mean,
Mhm.
there is no need to have this additional um, this additional access,
Mhm.
uh, for these people to get to you. So I mean, by all intents and purposes, for the most part, she seems grateful and thankful that as she's gotten older, that I've had this stance and this parenting style. um, and I think it'd be great to have these conversations with other parents, right?
Mhm.
But I know everybody has their own tolerance for risk, and as long as their kids are happy or whatever, they want to stay up to date on whatever trends are, so they're not left out. I know
Yeah.
that's pretty common. So it's difficult. So yeah, seeing the trend, right? So if a child is used to being treated in such a way going through the school system, middle school, high school, um, I've heard studies where they'll end up. I mean, I'm not quoting any statistics or particular studies, but just in my own ad hoc research in this topic, I've come across a lot of studies where people that go through this and are raised in these manners have a higher likelihood of choosing and latching onto partners, boyfriends, husbands, girlfriends, whatever, that exhibit these kind of behaviors because that's what they know. that's what they're used to. They haven't been shown what a healthy,
Yes.
relationship is, either through friendships, through, parenting, right? With mothers, dads. So definitely the upbringing, your environment has a huge impact on that. Yes, people can grow up and become fantastic individuals and end
Mhm.
up with great partners. But, I've seen a lot of the unfortunate adverse, right? So you
Mhm.
stick with what you know.
Mhm. Because it's more comfortable, and
Right.
they're used to being talked to that way, and it's just a different world out there from when I was in high school, just
Yeah, it's the world has changed,
Mhm.
unfortunately. So some for the good, some for the better, better, like technology has a lot of great uses, but like anything else we see in this world, whether it's a truck to run people over or anything can be used as a weapon, right?
Right.
Grew up being told sticks and stones break my bones.
Mhm.
But words will never hurt me. So but words are very damaging, especially when you're getting it from all angles. So you end up either having kids that want to either commit suicide, or unfortunately, because they have no other outlet and don't know where they can go to get truly good help,
Mhm.
they end up wanting to commit these acts of massive violence at these schools, which is heartbreaking because families lose loved ones and kids and teachers, and it's just the ripple effect, right? You throw a pebble into a lake and you see how it carries on.
Yes.
So that's why I've centered more around intervention and trying to intercede, because like with this one particular female student, my daughter knows there were warning signs about things. She would leave notes for my daughter, um, you know, saying she's going to miss her when she runs away, and she's
Mhm.
talking about people she met on Snapchat that are most likely predators. They're taking advantage of a vulnerable person,
Mhm.
which is heartbreaking. So just trying to get, I think, as a community, from the justice system to the family law system to the educational system. I mean, I know there are a lot of great groups out there trying to advocate, raise awareness with their specialties, but
Mhm.
I definitely want to support and do more, in that space as well.
Yeah, that's great. We need that because it's just so creepy out there, even with scam calls. Some
Yes,
people don't even know they're being scammed. Uh, you got some slick individuals out there that are I don't know how they get into your bank account because we all know not to give out our Social Security number, you know,
right.
but yet, I don't know. They start conversations and then I don't know, it's just very strange how these scammers happen on the phone.
Absolutely. That's a whole nother
Podcast.
topic of discussion. Yeah, ball of wax. I mean, that's how a lot of companies get breached. Is It's known as social engineering. I don't know if your audience is familiar, but
Mm-mm.
basically, social engineering is what these scammers are doing. And many times they'll research you before they call or email, and try to understand what makes you tick. And so they pray. What makes it so successful is, especially with your average user, whether it's an elderly person or a single person that is looking for love, right? There are romance scams left and right,
Mhm.
especially this time of year, right? We just passed Valentine's Day 2 days ago. Um, they prey. There are a lot of people that prey on people's emotions, and
Mhm.
they're, as humans, as an average human, we really fear disappointing somebody, letting somebody down.
Mhm.
Uh, an easy scam is I'm sure a lot of people have gotten, or your car warranty is expired, right? So
Mhm.
it's like, oh man, I don't, I'm low on money. I have financial problems. I don't want to, you know, end up having car problems and being out of a car can't work. So, sometimes those work because it creates panic, in the individual.
Mhm.
So I know we're spiraling out of the primary conversation, but yeah, that's another, um, major issue is the social engineering preying on people's emotions, right? It's a form of abuse, honestly, if you look at it,
Hmm.
because you're abusing somebody's emotions, their trust. Um, there are fake kidnapping calls where, a
Hmm.
parent or elderly person will be told, "Hey, we've got your son or your nephew or niece. If you don't give us, $50,000 or whatever, it turns out to be gift cards or Bitcoin."
Hmm.
Still, these people will panic and not think clearly, and either in many cases it turns out the person they call doesn't have that kind of, they don't have a child, or they don't have, that particular relative, and they feel kind of foolish afterwards or silly for being taken advantage of. My own grandmother has gotten calls as well about these
Yeah.
things. I'm sure people could call in and share all sorts of firsthand experiences with parents and grandparents and coworkers that have received such calls. So it's another form of abuse, honestly.
Hmm. Yeah, it really is. And y- isn't there something you can put on your phone? I'm sure there is, to alert that it's a scam call or spam or something like that.
Yeah, there are a lot of, I mean, they're hit or miss with how effective they are. So
Mhm.
some people take the approach of, if it's not saved in my phone book, I'm not going to answer. I'll let it go to voicemail. Spoken to a lot of people that take that approach. I'm a Verizon customer, and they have a lot of these companies now have paid services. It stinks that they're charging. I think the FCC or FTC um, put out legislation a while ago where they have to make this like a basic free service, but they don't follow that. But to answer your question, yeah, Verizon, has a call screening feature where, um, if it's known as spam, or a scam in their system, then, it'll have that label. So either you could set it up to be rejected automatically, um, or you can take the risk, because sometimes, if you're expecting an 800 call from, a provider,
Mhm.
it could be mislabeled. So yes, there are, I've tested out some apps myself, some third-party apps.
Mhm.
Some are pretty effective, others not as effective, but there are services. If people want to go out there and Google, and look for reviews, usually from well-known computer websites.
Mhm.
They'll already have reviewed a lot of these services and give their opinion on which they believe are most effective.
Mhm. Well, I'm sure with the work that you do, there are positive outcomes where people have been left alone.
There are, yeah, there are, while there are a lot of sad stories and outcomes I wish turned out differently.
Mhm.
I mean, it's hard to guarantee a specific outcome.
Mhm.
But I do the best I can in all circumstances. But yeah, there are, positive outcomes where after working with an individual or families for a period of time, they're better educated. Um, I like to, with my signature piece of Mind Advisors, my goal is to, equip people,
Mhm.
for companies that target commercial clients. You obviously want to be sticky. You want to have long-term services with them and have them rely on you. With me working with individuals and families, while I want people to come back to me for advice or if they have questions,
Mhm.
I love to leave them better equipped with knowledge, with resources that they can research on their own.
Mhm.
That way they're not dependent on somebody like me, or I try to get people away from the Best Buy Geek Squad
Yeah.
uh, mindset, because I've seen a lot of situations get exacerbated and made worse after working with them,
Mhm.
trying to get malware off computer or whatever. So
Mhm.
um, so I love equipping them. So, I'll share resources I use, with families and individuals,
Mhm.
and give them different options that they can, consider and research themselves, so they don't just have to take my word for it. But, um, things change, technology changes. So, here are some resources that I usually lean on for updates.
Mhm. Now, How can people get in touch with your Operation Safe Escape if they have problems?
Um, I'm a volunteer with them. I'm not on the leadership team or anything, but they can, Google it, Operation Safe Escape. Um, that's one method. I know a lot of domestic abuse shelters refer individuals to Operation Safe Escape as
Mhm.
well.
And you see here, like also the We Create Warriors.
Yes. So that, we are working, we are recognized in the state of Texas as a nonprofit. Uh, Full disclosure, we're actively working with a legal team to get recognized by the IRS.
Mhm.
So that's a work in progress, but we're recognized in Texas. And in regards to, um, a website where we're building our online presence currently. So
Mhm.
hoping to have that, in the next couple of months. So survivors, we're trying to get away from the whole victim mentality. We create warriors. The lady and her daughter
Mhm.
that created it are survivors of their own. And so myself and others, believed in them and wanted to lend our own backgrounds to, helping them succeed and get this vision to fruition.
Mhm.
So we've been working on it for a year. Where we're trying to get the resources to put a website together in the very near future. So unfortunately, we don't have that today, but um, if people need information or want to contribute, in any way, shape, or form, or talk, they can reach out to me directly. I've got an email address I shared with you and my website,
Okay.
um, and then we can have these conversations.
Yeah, and I'll put all of that in the podcast notes too, so I won't
Okay.
have you say it all.
Yeah, no worries. That's fine. So, uh, for Operation Safe Escape, their website is it's safeescape.org. So SAFEESCAPE.org. So, your listeners can go there and look at the resources they provide as well. They have a really strong team that volunteers there year round, um, that actively communicates and works with survivors. So
Mhm.
uh, they've been around for a number of years and very successful in what they do. So um, hoping to do the same with We Create Warriors,
Yeah.
but the focus is creating warriors out of victims so that they can have a
Mhm.
good success victory story long term.
Definitely. I'm so glad we had this conversation. This is so needed, and attorneys and judges need to be aware of all of this
Right.
in their cases, you know?
I think it would make a difference. I've seen some use cases in my own world where I have seen positive outcomes once.
Mhm.
They may be resistant at first, but staying consistent, showing the legal path that you followed to obtain that evidence, and explaining in terms that they can understand. Right,
Mhm.
you've got to you know uh, write your reports and have your conversations at the level of your audience, right, just like this podcast. So
Mhm.
attorneys prefer high level,
Mhm.
not the deep technical nerd
Yeah.
jargon. um,
Yeah.
just saying, okay, this person had, we found this malicious software on their phone. This is what this does. This is what it gave their abusers, and this is the outcome that it had on their life.
Mhm.
uh, and so that's gone all the way to prosecutors, and I've seen cases dropped, thankfully, against those being abused, um, for civil matters. So um, in some criminal. So I'm hoping to keep that trend and continue building my network and uh, you know growing growing the awareness together, because it's a big country, big problems, but
Yeah.
I think with everybody chipping away at it with their own areas of expertise and background, I think if we can come together, that will make a great much needed impact for the victims. So.
Well, I appreciate your time and you coming on my podcast. I totally appreciate that. And is there anything else you'd like to add?
I mean, I'm sure we could talk for hours about all these different
Yeah.
aspects, but
Yeah.
I'm truly grateful to be invited on your podcast. Hopefully, we can talk again.
Oh, we will. We
So,
will.
very honored to be accepted as a guest on your show. So, hopefully, it provided some value to your
Oh,
listeners.
yes. Thank you.
Happy to provide clarification or follow up to anybody that wants to reach out
Mhm.
and see what we can do to to help them out.
Yeah, I definitely want you to pop back on in the future. So, don't jump off. Slam the Gavel is a podcast to help the public understand what really goes on in these family courtrooms. I'm your host, Marianne Petrie, author of Dismantling Family Court Corruption, Why Taking the Kids Was Not Enough, and Cry Out for Justice, Poems of Truth. Join us again here with Ken Vignali in the future and other guests. Thank you so much, Ken. I totally appreciate you.
It was an honor. Thank you once again.
Thank you.